I have a beige cardboard ledger on the second shelf of my study. 61 years of household accounts in Calabrese American mixed with pencil English. 312 recipes. 11,000 prices. The woman who wrote it spent 47 years married to a man who never opened it. Her name was Rosa DiMaggio. Her husband Antonio was a Bloomfield mason. He was not a cruel man. He carried a lunch bucket to a work site at 6 in the morning, brought a folded paycheck home Friday evenings, and signed the family name at the Mellon Bank on Liberty Avenue, because in 1948 the bank would only speak to him. He did not know the home he came back to was financed by a parallel ledger his name was not on. He did not know because Rosa never asked him to. The home Antonio thought he was paying for, the brick row house on South Atlantic Avenue, the 4 daughters' weddings, the polenta on Sunday, was held up underneath by a second set of books kept by the woman who cooked the polenta. I'm going to read you those books today. But first, you have to see the table where the rules were written. I am Eleanor. I was a visiting nurse in Pittsburgh for 40 years. The notebooks on the shelf behind me were given to me by the women whose houses I sat inside on 100,000 Tuesday afternoons. Stay with me this hour and tell me in the comments, whose ledger do you have on a shelf in your own house? Or whose ledger do you wish you had? I read every one. The first time I walked into Rosa DiMaggio's kitchen was a Tuesday morning in October of 1978. I was 29 years old. Rosa was 70. She had been a widow for 3 years, and the kitchen still ran on Antonio's old schedule, even though Antonio had been buried since the summer of '75. The kettle was on. A small jar of sugar sat on a saucer beside it. The window over the sink looked down a concrete backyard at a wooden grape arbor Antonio had built in 1952, which Rosa was still pruning herself at 70 with a pair of shears that had been her father-in-law's. A tomato sauce reduced on the back burner. I could smell oregano, and a particular sweetness, Rosa told me weeks later, was a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, a Calabrese habit, not a Sicilian one, which I have written into my own pot of sauce every Sunday for 47 years. The kitchen was small. The floor was the original brown linoleum laid in 1948 when Antonio bought the house from his Calabrese cousin. The walls were a kitchen yellow Rosa had painted herself in 1955 and never repainted because, as she told me on a later visit, the yellow was the right yellow and she had only ever found it once. There was a small holy card of San Francesco di Paola, the patron saint of Calabria, tucked into the frame of a mirror on the wall. There was a calendar from the Bloomfield funeral home hung on a nail beside the back door. The funeral home gave one out every January to every Italian household on South Atlantic Avenue. It was free. Rosa marked the saint days on it in red pencil and the mortgage due dates in blue. There was a wooden cross over the kitchen door that Rosa hung every year on the feast of John the Baptist, with a sprig of basil from the backyard tied to it with kitchen twine. The cross had hung there 46 times by the morning I first walked in. The ledger sat open on the kitchen table, beige cardboard, the kind you could buy at the Strip District stationery shop on Penn Avenue for 35 cents in 1928. The cover was so worn, the original label was nearly gone. In Rosa's pencil along the spine, Il libretto, the little book. I had not noticed it the first 3 visits because Rosa always closed it before she sat down with me. On the 4th visit, she left it open. She said she would close it in a minute, and then she did not. I learned eventually that this was Rosa's way of inviting a woman to look without having to be asked. On the open page in pencil, I could see what looked like a recipe for pasta e fagioli. The recipe was written in Italian first, then in English, and beside each ingredient there was a small number, a column of numbers down the right margin, and in the very margin, beside the title of the recipe, there was a small pencil star. For the first 6 years I visited Rosa, I thought that star was a quality rating. I thought she was marking the 5-star dishes the way a restaurant review might. I was 29 years old, and I had a nursing degree, and I had eaten in restaurants. I imposed a framework I knew. I told my own daughter Katie once, when she was 12, that the Rosa system was charming. I used that word, charming. Katie is 47 now, and she still teases me about it. Rosa watched me misread her ledger across 144 Tuesday morning visits before she laid the pencil down beside the open page in the spring of 1984 and said in her flat Bloomfield Calabrese English, "No, Eleanor, the star is what the recipe costs. The star is when the recipe is cheap." I understood in that one sentence how badly I had been reading her. I had been sitting at the table of a woman running a household economy the size of a small business, and I had been treating her ledger as a charming relic of an old country. I felt a small shame, the kind you feel as a young professional who has been condescended to by no one but herself. I asked if she would teach me what the book was actually for. She laughed and said, "Eleanor cara, the book is for the family to eat on Tuesday." And then, across the next 8 years, she did. To understand why Rosa needed her own ledger, you have to understand what Antonio's ledger was. Antonio's ledger was the Mellon Bank passbook in the top drawer of the bureau in the front bedroom. It had his name on it. It had his signature in it. Every 2 weeks he walked his paycheck to the Mellon branch on Liberty Avenue and put the bulk of it into the passbook account. The passbook recorded the rent, the gas, the electric, the parish dues, the loan payments on the row house. That was what the passbook was for. The formal contracts of the household. It was a thin booklet with a navy paper cover and a column of stamped figures inside. It fit in the inside pocket of Antonio's Sunday coat. Antonio kept it there, walking to and from the bank, and the rest of the week it sat in the drawer. The passbook did not know about food. It did not know about clothes. It did not know about the parish mass card economy. It did not know about the dowries Rosa was building for 4 daughters, 1 tablecloth and 1 set of pillowcases at a time. It did not know about the garden in the backyard that fed the family 60% of its vegetables across the year. It did not know about the day of the week. It did not know about the stars. Antonio carried the passbook because the bank would speak only to him. He carried it because the state of Pennsylvania would only put his name on the deed. He carried it because he had been trained in a Calabrese village in 1914 to be the man who carried the paperwork. He was not protecting the household by signing. He was being assigned a role by an institution that had decided before either of them arrived that he, and not she, would be the household's legal name. In 1948, a married woman in Pennsylvania could not open a checking account in her own name without her husband's countersignature. She could not get a mortgage. She could not, in many establishments, even cash her own paycheck if she had one. The bank ran on Antonio. The kitchen ran on Rosa. The brick walls held them both up together, but the brick walls do not know which name is on which document. The brick walls only know what is paid. There is a phrase for what Rosa was doing under Antonio's signature. The economists call it female household economic agency. The historians call it informal women's labour. Rosa called it the way the family ate on Tuesday. She did not need a phrase, she had her ledger. The ledger had been keeping the phrase in pencil since 1928. The architecture was not unique to her household. Every Italian woman on South Atlantic Avenue had a version. Every Polish woman on Polish Hill, 2 ridges to the north, had a version. Halina Kowalska on Brereton Street kept 6 tin envelopes on a shelf, which is a different story I will tell another day. The whole working-class women's economy of mid-century Pittsburgh ran on a parallel set of books the banks did not see, and the husbands did not always see, and the priests sometimes saw, and the other women always saw. Our Lady Help of Christians on Liberty Avenue, where Rosa walked every Sunday for 44 years, had a wooden box in the vestibule where you slid in $1.50 for a memorial mass for a dead relative. Rosa paid one of those masses for every Bloomfield widow's husband for 40 years. I will get to that ledger line in a little while. I promise. But first you need to understand that what looked like Rosa being pious was Rosa running a small private welfare line out of her grocery money, and that the parish was a financial institution, and Rosa knew it was, even if no one was permitted to say so out loud in 1955. Now, the title today says 25 Tricks. It says hid from husbands. The framing the world uses is not the framing Rosa would have used. She did not hide things the way the word hide sounds in 2026. She kept her own books because there was no chair at Antonio's bank for her to sit in. What looks today like deception was in 1950 simply where a married immigrant woman's competence was allowed to live. Inside the kitchen, on cardboard, in pencil. Hold the word hide loosely while I walk you through. The first rule was the day of the week rule. Rosa knew which Bloomfield market sold which cut cheapest on which day. Wednesday was chicken at the corner butcher on Penn Avenue, marked down at noon because his Tuesday shipment had to clear by Thursday. Thursday was lamb shanks across from Our Lady Help of Christians. Friday was fish. Saturday was beef bones for Sunday gravy. Tuesday was the planning day. Tuesday Rosa wrote the week. The other days she executed it. The second rule was the star rule. Every recipe under a certain cost per serving, around 12 cents in 1940, around 40 by 1970, got a small pencil star beside the title. Pasta e fagioli was a star. Escarole and bean soup was a star. Sunday gravy with meatballs and braciole was emphatically not. Rosa cooked stars for 2 weeks before Easter and 2 weeks before Christmas. The savings paid for the Vigilia di Natale and the Easter lamb. The feast on the holy day was paid for by 28 ordinary suppers in the weeks before. The stars were not a quality rating. The stars were a payroll calendar. The third rule was the grow it rule. Rosa's backyard from 1932 onward produced 60% of the household's vegetables. The garden was a line in her ledger marked, quello che non ho comprato, what I did not buy. The number, year over year, was in the hundreds of dollars in 1950 money. The garden was a paycheck the passbook did not record. The fourth rule was the recipe as savings rule. A recipe in Rosa's ledger was never just a recipe. It was a financial instrument. She could turn to any page in any week and know within 10 cents what the family would eat on what day for what price. The fifth rule was the dowry rule. Rosa started a fund for each daughter in the year that daughter was born. Antonio's bank had no line for a girl's wedding. The fund was a slow accumulation of household goods: bedsheets at 6, pillowcases at 8, a wooden chest at 12, filled across 10 years with linens Rosa had been buying since the daughter was born. By the time the daughter married, the chest contained 20 years of small Tuesday decisions Antonio never priced. The sixth rule was the mass card rule. Listen to this one, because it is where you can see what Rosa was actually building. The parish charged a fee for a memorial mass, $1.50 in 1950, $5 in 1989. Rosa paid that fee for every Bloomfield widow's husband for 40 years. Every one. When a man died, his widow received within a week a small printed card from Our Lady Help of Christians saying a memorial mass had been said for her husband. The card never named Rosa. I have read the mass card page maybe 100 times. A column down the left with the name of the dead man, a column down the right with the dollar figure. 178 entries across 40 years. The total in pencil by Rosa in 1989 was $391.50, roughly $4,000 today. The widows did not know who was paying. The parish knew. The parish did not say. Rosa did not call this charity. She called it La Cosa Giusta, the right thing, which was a Calabrese way of saying it was simply how a married woman with an open ledger took care of the widows around her. The seventh rule, and I'm going to leap past the remaining 18 because they are variations on the first 7, was the one Rosa came into the day after Antonio's funeral. Everything I have said came to its sharpest point on October 6, 1975. Antonio had been buried the day before. Rosa was 67, 66 I should say, the September before she turned 67. She came home in her dark coat, sat down at the kitchen table, opened the ledger, turned to a fresh page in the back, and in pencil, in a hand that did not shake, she wrote a single phrase in Italian. La pensione della vedova. The widow's pension. The Social Security benefit that would arrive in her mailbox on the 3rd of every month from then on. She did not write it as charity. She wrote it as a salary line, her own, finally, after 47 years of being the unpaid bookkeeper of the family inside the house. When her son came around 3 months later, suggesting she might share it to ease his mortgage, she told him, La pensione è la prima volta che il governo americano ha pagato me. The pension is the first time the American government has paid me. She refused him. She kept paying the mass cards. She kept buying dowry linens for the granddaughters. Rosa was not alone. Down on Penn Avenue in Lawrenceville lived a woman named Mary O'Connor. Mary was third-generation Pittsburgh Irish. Her grandparents had come from County Galway in the 1880s, and Mary kept an account book her mother Bridget had started in 1903. 3 generations of women had written in that book by the time Mary handed me a photocopy in 1998. The book tracked the boarders Bridget took in 1908, 4 men at a time, $5 a week. It tracked the Lawrenceville Irish Catholic Burial Society Bridget joined in 1907, and Mary continued for 96 years between them. It tracked the day Patrick O'Connor retired from the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1976 and the way Mary moved his pension into her envelope system. Mary's hand is round and Catholic school clean. Rose's is small and Calabrese pencil pressed. Mary tracked funeral envelopes, Rosa tracked mass cards. The architecture is identical. Both were the second set of books. Both outlived the husbands. Both are on the shelf behind me. I want to say something about Antonio and about Patrick and about all the husbands who never opened the second set of books. They were not stupid men. They were not cruel men. They were working men whose backs and lungs were used up by 60 in service of a household economy they were trained to think they were running alone. Antonio came home Friday with brick dust on the cuffs of his coat, put a folded paycheck on the table, and assumed Rosa would handle it. The bank had taught him that. His father in 1914 Calabria had taught him that. The system that told him he was the bank's only acceptable name had also told him he need not look at the other ledger. He never looked, not because he disrespected her work, but because he had been trained her work was beneath the line men were taught to read. He was a captive of the same machine that pressed Rosa into the kitchen. Rosa's part lasted 61 years and produced the home. Antonio's lasted 47 and produced the deed. Only one was on paper at the bank. October 6, 1975, was the day the two ledgers became one. She kept that book another 14 years. Then she gave it to me in the spring of 1990, 2 years before she died. I was at her kitchen table the morning she handed it over. She was 82. I was 41. She put the ledger in my hands and said, "Eleanor, my daughters will fight over the silverware. Take this before they look. This is for someone who will read it." I took it home and put it on the shelf my husband Thomas had built in 1991 in what had been my father's tool room. It has lived there for 35 years. When Thomas died in 2017, I was 68. I had been a widow for 1 week when I sat down at my own kitchen table on Pius Street and pulled Rosa's ledger off the shelf and opened it to the back page, the page that says La pensione della vedova in Rosa's pencil. I built my own widow's budget that morning by reading hers. I built it as a salary line. I would not have known how to do any of that without Rosa. I was 40 years late to her lesson and 40 years on time to my own widowhood. Mary O'Connor's photocopied account book is on the shelf 2 books over from Rosa's. Halina Kowalski's cloth-bound brown notebook from Polish Hill sits on the shelf above. The shelf holds about 80 notebooks now from 68 different women. Every one of them was given to me by a woman who said some version of what Rosa said. I am reading them. I am going to be reading them for a long time. If there is a woman in your family who kept a notebook on a kitchen table for a long time and never showed it to her husband, you have one of Rosa's ledgers. Look for it. If there is a phrase in your grandmother's handwriting in the margin of a recipe she gave your mother, a small pencil star you cannot explain, you have one of Rosa's ledgers. Look closer. If you have ever wondered why your mother could feed 8 people on what looked like nothing, why the funeral cards arrived at every widow's door with no name on them, why the Christmas Eve table appeared and you could not see where the money came from. You have already been raised inside one of Rosa's ledgers. You did not know its name. The economists call it female household economic agency. The women called it the way the family ate on Tuesday. Rosa called it il libretto, the little book. They are gone now. What they knew is yours.